Let's bring in NBC News legal analyst Misty Marris now. So, Misty, the judge is ordering jurors to be sequestered now for the deliberations. Why? Do you think social media, as Brian was just talking about, could be playing a role here?
Well, there's a lot going on outside the courtroom, and so the judge has determined that the jury will be sequestered. So that limits pretty much all contact with the outside world, including limitations on what media could be consumed either intentionally or accidentally when they go home to their families. But it also relates to insulating them from any intimidation or issues that could impact the way that they view the case outside of what they're supposed to look at, which is only the evidence that came into the trial.
Right. So we heard from one of Anthony's teammates yesterday. He did not take the stand in his own defense. Do you think that was a smart choice? And how critical was that testimony yesterday from one of his friends?
So there's a couple of issues with taking the stand. Of course, a defendant rarely does. But in a self-defense case, that's where you see a defendant often take the stand because it's all about their perception of a threat. So explaining that to the jury and why it was reasonable under the circumstances is certainly something that the jury likely wants to hear. Now, it can't be held against them. But in order to establish self-defense, it's a bit of a different thing than your typical, the defendant doesn't have to say anything. They are trying to raise a defense that says what they did was justified. So without hearing from the defendant, that's tricky. There could be a lot of reasons for them not to do it. Remember, right before the defense closed their case, there was a 3-hour sidebar with the judge and the parties. So it could be about what was going to come in on cross-examination or issues that made the defense go a different way. And remember, it's always up to the client whether or not they take the stand.
I was going to say, could it have been a plea deal too, that discussion, or no?
It doesn't seem to be. It seems like they're going to the jury. There were some issues relating to the jury instructions, as Ryan pointed out. The jury instructions now include a lesser included offense of manslaughter. So this could either be a murder conviction, a manslaughter conviction, and acquittal if the jury agrees on self-defense, or always the possibility of a hung jury.
And this all just started, I believe, last Thursday. So this has moved pretty quickly, Misty, for a case of this magnitude.
Yeah, this has been at lightning speed. The judges kept it really, really fast-paced. In fact, there was testimony on Saturday. And a lot of that rationale was not only just to keep the case moving, but it's also because of the massive attention on the case, trying to get through it and get ultimately to the jury who now has the case and will determine the verdict.
All right, Misty Marris, thank you so much for your legal insight. Appreciate it.